This lecture is on the female reproductive system. So the female reproductive system. The female gonads are the ovaries. And the ovaries make eggs. Which are the female gametes. You know that. And then the hormone estrogen causes development of what are called female secondary sex characteristics. Okay. So secondary sex characteristics are the things not directly related to reproduction that nonetheless will tend to indicate one sex or another. So this then will be things like wide hips and breasts and the like. So there are two ovaries found in the lower abdomen. And each ovary is approximately 4 centimeters long by 2 centimeters wide. But this varies from individual to individual, and it can also vary with the time of the month. It can vary with where a woman is in her menstrual cycle. And each ovary contains approximately then 200,000 tiny egg sacs. Called follicles. And each follicle contains an immature egg. So, carrying on with what I said here, then, all these immature eggs are present at birth, and then during a lifetime, no more than 500 eggs will mature. And then when an egg matures, its follicle moves to the surface of the ovary. And the follicle then breaks releasing the egg. And this process of the follicle breaking and releasing the egg then is called ovulation. And now I'm going to erase the board and start putting up a picture. All right, so I'm going to try not to use the whole board doing this, but anyway, so let's see, this is not necessarily going to be to scale, but here we have an ovary. I'm going to move that over a little bit to give myself some room for labels on this side. So anyway, let's put an ovary here. And I'm going to put another one here, and this is strictly not to scale. Please understand that. And then we're going to have the fimbriae, and like so. And the fimbriae here, like this. And then we get on to where these two tubes, which is what I'm drawing here, where these two tubes then come together in the middle, like so, and then this creates a passage here. I think I'm going to make that a little bit broader just so that you can see a bit better. Here we go. That will do. And what I'm getting at is that here we have a continuation of the tube, of a passage here. And then here we have the external walls of the uterus, which are muscular. And then down here, we will have the vagina or birth canal, And the passage in the uterus becomes very narrow right at the bottom there. This is not too bad. Okay, so let us start labeling things now. So here we have the vagina or birth canal. That's this. And then up here, this area in here where we have the very narrow bottom of the uterus here, these then are known as the cervix. So then this then is the uterus, which is comprised of these muscular walls on the outside and the passage in the middle there. The passage is not, in fact, stopped up. There we go. And then over here, we have an ovary. I'm just going to kind of indicate this. This is the outside of the ovary. Here, I will have done a slice through the ovary so that you can see some follicles here. Maybe some very immature follicles. But some of these follicles, then, here we go. So there we have some follicles. And so here, then, we have the setup. And what I'm going to do here is just jump the gun a little bit, but here, then, we have the beginning of the story. There we have an egg, then, from a ruptured follicle. So it is starting its trip there, and it is now in this tube, which on both sides then is known as the oviduct, also known as the fallopian tube and the uterine tube. So a bunch of names for the same thing. So here we have ovulation has just taken place. That egg is now in the oviduct. So an egg can be fertilized for about 24 hours after ovulation. And near each ovary is an oviduct. Also known as a fallopian tube, sometimes also called a uterine tube. All words for the same thing, with a funnel-shaped opening. So you have an ovary then, and then you have this funnel-shaped opening with these little finger-like projections that I've put in there known as fimbriae. And those little, they make, as I said, something like a funnel. Now, so we have an egg that pops out of an ovary. There is not a direct connection then between the ovary and the oviduct. Even with that funnel, there's still some wiggle room there. And the way that the egg actually winds up in the oviduct most of the time is as follows. There are cilia, then, lining the oviduct. So let's draw some of them in. I'm not going to draw all of them in, but the point is here, there will be cilia all throughout the oviduct here. So there are your cilia inside the oviduct. And these create a current that draws the egg into the tube. So basically what happens, remember this is what happens when you are dealing with cilia in multicellular organisms. They will often be found lining something, and what happens is that the cilia will all work together doing a wave like this, and in this case they create a current, and they basically essentially vacuum the egg into the oviduct just by creating this current. So the oviduct then is where the egg may be fertilized if any sperm are present. And then from, that's an F there, so then from the oviduct, the egg passes into the uterus. So if things go the way they are supposed to, this egg, having been ruptured out of a follicle in an ovary and kind of into space, if you will, it then gets vacuumed up into the ovia by the cilia creating a current, and eventually that egg will wind up in the chamber of the uterus. So the uterus is both the muscular walls on the outside and the chamber on the inside. So the uterus is thick-walled and muscular. And if an egg has been fertilized, it finishes developing in the uterus attached to the uterine wall. So this is actually a big and important step. What I am getting at here is that if this egg has been fertilized, what it needs to do then is actually, it is called implantation. The egg must actually implant itself on this interior wall of the uterus. And without implantation, a fertilized egg cannot develop much further, and it will simply pass out of the body along with menstrual fluid. So this is a very important and not guaranteed step. So you can have an egg that manages to make it successfully out of the ovary without going astray into the abdomen, getting fertilized, making its way through the oviduct. It's fertilized, and then it still has to do this very important step of actually implanting successfully on the interior lining, the interior wall of the uterus, if it is going to continue to develop and become a successful pregnancy. And then, in any case, carrying on with the basic anatomy, the narrow neck at the bottom of the uterus is called the cervix. So here we have the cervix here, not drawn to scale. And the cervix then opens onto the vagina or birth canal. I'll even make that a comma. Which leads to outside the body. So let's say that this actually winds up becoming a successful pregnancy that gestates to term. Then what will happen is this. At birth, the baby leaves the mother's body through the birth canal. So the baby winds up developing in this chamber, which grows considerably, and the uterus, as I said, spreads out considerably during gestation. But then the baby will then come down here. It will pass through the cervix, which does dilate to allow the baby through, and then the baby passes through the vagina or birth canal to the outside world. And that's the end of this lecture.